butter chicken meatballs with a perfect garlic rice. This is a family staple that will warm you all winter long. All right, guys, we are making butter chicken meatballs. So we're starting with the meatball mix. This is super simple, like the basic of the basic when it comes to the meatball mix. And again, you can get more creative with this if you want, but because these are gonna get coated in that delicious butter sauce, it is just fine how it is. So we have a pound of ground chicken. Ground turkey would work just fine as well if you're preferable to that. And I have a half a cup of panko breadcrumbs. We're gonna crack in 1 egg. And then I'm also putting in a little bit of garlic powder and some curry powder to add in a little extra seasoning. And then finally, I'm gonna grab a little bit of salt. Good sprinkle of salt. I use Diamond Kosher salt. It is kind of the chef's kiss when it comes to salt, but season to your taste. And then gloves on, because this is the fun part. We just get to mush it all up together. And these come together super fast. The breadcrumbs help kind of absorb and keep all that moisture locked in so the chicken doesn't dry out. And then we're gonna bake these off in the oven, and then right after they get put in that creamy butter sauce that we're going to make, and they just absorb all of that flavor. So that's why we can go a little bit simpler on the meatballs. We don't need to really just go overboard and add a bunch of stuff. They are just perfect the way they are. So that is mixed. Now what I like to do is I have one clean hand. I'll take my little bottle of oil, and I just oil my gloves up a little bit. It makes forming the meatballs a little bit easier so they don't get sticky on your hands. So a little secret there. And I just rub my hands together and then just make about golf ball size meatballs. They don't have to be all the same. You can get a scooper out if you really like to, but I am a total eyeballer here. This is home cooking. We don't have to be perfect. We are not working in a Michelin star restaurant here. We are cooking for our family and friends, and it's all about flavor. So I'm just gonna dish these out. This is gonna make about like 20-ish meatballs, maybe 18, something like that. Enough to feed a family of 4. So if you have a bigger family or feeding for a crowd, 1 pound of meat will feed about 4 people, especially once we add in the rice and all the sauce. You're good that way. We might only get 12 or 16. I'm going a little heavy-handed today, but I am going to hit these with a tiny bit of oil over top just to make sure they get nice and brown. And then these will cook in the oven about 15 minutes on 350. They don't have to be fully cooked because they're going to cook in that butter sauce, but we're dealing with chicken, so I like to make sure that we cook them all the way 15 minutes, 350 degrees, and they'll be ready to slide right into that butter sauce. Our meatballs are in the oven, so while those are cooking, we're gonna make this delicious butter sauce that we're gonna put our meatballs in. The first thing we need to do is chop up our aromatics, some onion and garlic. We can see that I already chopped my finger today, so I'm gonna take my time. Our knives are sharp. So we got our onion ready. I am gonna put in some coconut oil into the pan. I've got it on like medium-low heat. I don't want it super, super hot because we're just gonna sweat off those aromatics. So I'm gonna get that coconut oil in, and then I'm gonna add our onions right into the pan. Let those start going. That coconut oil, when it starts to melt, is so fragrant. It just makes such a big difference in this dish. And I like to layer flavors. So we're adding this coconut oil at the beginning, and then we're also going to be adding coconut milk. So we're adding it in kind of 2 different forms, and it's going to really let those flavors come out. All right, I'm also chopping up some garlic, just a rough chop on this. It doesn't have to be like super, super perfect. It's going to cook down so much in the sauce. All right, guys, I'm going to stop and show you a little trick. This is like a chef's trick. If you notice, like as I'm chopping, my cutting board is starting to move all over the board, which is also where injuries can happen. I am taking a paper towel that I got a little bit wet. We're going to take it like this, and then I'm going to not move my board because, again, my cameraman won't go away. But I'm going to put it underneath, and it's going to make a pretty like sticky surface for my board. And now it's not going to move when I'm cutting. So chef secret, a really good at-home trick. You can get some of those like non-stick like paper things that you can put down or mats, but a paper towel works great. And then you just throw it out. And now my board, it's not going all over the place. I'm going to put in my garlic. Let that toast for just like 30 seconds. We don't want to burn our garlic. If your pan's too hot, turn it down or just lift off. You don't want to see that garlic getting any sort of color. It turns bitter so fast. Season as we go. I'm going to hit it with a touch of salt, a bit of pepper, and then we're going to get all of our spices in this pan. So when it comes to Indian cooking, it's really not all about just cooking with the spices. It's about getting the fragrance out of these spices. So we do that by getting them in heat. And heat is going to help bloom those spices. And as they hit the heat, they're really going to like let go of all of their oils and their fragrances and come back to life. They're fine like as they are in their dried form, but they really need the heat and the oil to help kind of like bring them back to life. So in here, we have a big mixture of spices. We have some garam masala, we have curry powder, cayenne pepper, and some turmeric. So all of these together are like just like a marriage of yumminess. Really great color. That turmeric adds that like golden color. And immediately this hits the pan and it just like smells delicious. Like super warm, super like just floral, aromatic, really, really yummy flavors. And we're going to want this to toast again for about a minute before we go on to the next step. Give them a chance to warm up, kind of get nutty and toasty. It is so perfumey. So, so good. And now we're going to start rounding out the flavors and really adding kind of like the butter part to this. So we need some tomato paste. It's a tomato-based sauce. So I like to use tomato paste. It really packs a punch when it comes to flavor and gives you that, I cooked for this for 4 hours type feeling. So I have a whole can of tomato paste that I'm going to put in. And you really want to cook this down a bit. Tomato paste, just like those spices, it needs a minute to kind of really cook down to kind of let go of some of its like tinniness. It needs to cook out a little bit. We're going to let that go. And then pretty soon here, I'm going to switch to a whisk so we can get this saucing up. So the next thing we're going to add is our coconut milk. And now this is going to turn into that like pink orangey color. It is so good. So put this in. Now this is where we see this sauce just come together. It's going to be a little thick right now because of the tomato paste. So I also have a bit of water that was kind of just in the residual coconut milk that I'm adding in. I'm just going to slowly stir that. It's going to get so delicious. And this, after I get this all incorporated, we're going to let this kind of cook together and marry for a good 5 minutes. We want this to simmer before we kind of finish the sauce and add in the final ingredients. This is also where, after I let this simmer, I'm going to taste for seasoning. It may need some more salt. Sometimes when we're using tomato paste, this is another secret, because it's sitting in that aluminum can for a while, you might need to add some sweetness. That's why you always hear like, oh, if you're making pasta sauce from scratch, lots of times you need to add some sugar. It's the same here because we're using that canned tomato paste. Lots of times it might need a touch of sugar or honey, just something to kind of round those flavors out. It can kind of stick out like a sore thumb if you don't have it. All right, so we're gonna let this cook for a couple minutes. When we come back, we're gonna taste, finish the sauce, and then plop our meatballs right in here. We have been simmering away for a couple minutes, so I'm gonna taste test this and see kind of where we are. It's really coming together. Definitely needs a pinch of salt. You can tell when it needs salt when like you taste it and you're just like, eh. Like if you just do that, you're like, okay, just add salt and things will come to life a bit. And then I am gonna add a squeeze of honey, probably about, I don't know, a tablespoon. And that also will help just kind of bring all the flavors together. The fun part about like cooking like this is you can't really go wrong. I always like to have on hand like something salty, something sweet, something acidic, like a squeeze of lime at the end of this goes really well. We're going to add in some fresh herbs that bring it back to life. You kind of want to have all of those options on hand. So as you're cooking, you can kind of like toss something in and just see what happens. So much better already. Now to finish, we're going to add in some plain Greek yogurt. So it's going to give it a little bit of like tart tanginess. It's a very traditional ingredient used to make butter chicken. And that also just kind of like melts into the sauce. You want to do this right at the end. If you do this in the beginning, it can separate and cause the sauce to get a little grainy. So I'm on super low heat right now, just letting that melt in. And we're also going to finish with some cilantro. So I'm going to kind of bunch up my cilantro and just give it a nice rough chop. Doesn't have to be perfect. And that goes right in there. I'm going to finish with one more little sprinkling of salt. And we'll be ready to get our meatballs out, get our rice together, and we are going to be golden. I don't know, the yogurt does something to this sauce. It just hits that little bit of tang. It just completes the sauce and makes it, I don't know, it just tastes right. You just need it. If you don't have plain Greek yogurt, sour cream would work as well. If you had that on hand, either of those will work. All right, we're gonna get our rice together now. I'm gonna show you a couple secrets for how to make really, really delicious, super fluffy rice. Couple chef secrets coming your way. We are gonna make some garlic rice. This is how I make rice for my family. Every time I make it, it has a couple tricks in there that just makes such a difference when we're talking about just plain white rice and really tasty, flavorful, fluffy rice. So the first thing we're going to do is actually get some garlic toasted with some coconut oil. In this dish, I'm using coconut oil. If you're using it for a different application, you can just use butter or even just regular light colored or olive oil will work just fine. So I'm going to get a little bit of that into our pan to get melted down. And then I am going to slice up a couple cloves of garlic. Just gonna chop these up. Just get a fine chop on these. This is just going to add so much flavor into the rice. So I'm going to put that in. I'm going to put this into the rice and let this start toasting. Next, I'm going to take, so I have a cup of rice here. I have already rinsed this quite a few times under cold water. That is going to remove all the starch. It's going to make the rice super fluffy and not sticky. The starch, when you cook it, is what makes rice get that sticky consistency. So you want to make sure you rinse it really well if that's not what you're going for. We're not making sticky rice here. So I've already rinsed it, drained it. You can see how it's draining off. And then I'm going to toast this for a good 5 minutes in this coconut oil and the garlic, and it's gonna just get that rice to a much more like nutty consistency. That goes in, we mix it together with the oil, and we're gonna let it toast up for a few minutes. You want to start to see the color almost change on the rice. It's gonna go from that translucent to a little bit more opaque color. Some granules might start getting a little golden brown. That's perfect. That's when we're gonna add in our stock. We are starting to get a little sizzle on our pan. The rice is starting to toast up a little bit. Even just a couple minutes makes such a big difference when we are talking about pre-toasting it, pre-toasting the rice. Our next and final secret is that I always cook my rice in stock. I think it just makes such, like, why not add flavor to the rice you're cooking, whether it's chicken stock, vegetable stock, beef stock. Well, I don't really use beef stock that much, but chicken stock and vegetable stock, you might as well have the opportunity to add more flavor as opposed to just using water. It's just another way to layer in more flavors to your dish. At the very least, I at least use like salted water to add in a little bit of flavor. So our 1-to-2 ratio or 2-to-1 ratio, so 2 cups of stock is going into our rice. We're going to mix that, bring it up to a boil, and then we will cover it and let that go about 20 minutes, and our rice will be ready for us. We have our meatballs straight hot from the oven, and they're going to go right into our butter chicken sauce. So I'm going to take them and just loosen them from the pan. And they're just going to go right in there. You can already tell that they're perfectly cooked. Them right in there, all of that juicy goodness. This is when I learned my lesson that like my spatial awareness comes back to bite me again, that like this pan is like at its max capacity. But that's okay. It makes it look really impressive. So we're gonna let these go for a couple minutes. It just, since they're nice and hot, it's just gonna absorb all of that flavor into the meatballs. So yummy. Just get them all covered. And then we get to plate this up. So easy. We're gonna take just a bowl here. I always put the rice all over the bowl. So we're gonna take our perfect garlic rice and plop it right in the middle of the bowl. So delicious. And again, with all of this sauce, the rice just like soaks it all up. I love to serve this with some naan bread on the side too, because then you just get the whole like dip thing going. And we are gonna take our meatballs, put like 3 of them around, and then a nice extra scooping of sauce over top. This will cure anything you got going on. It is spicy, it is savory, it is floral. It is just so delicious. And with that rice, honestly, they just like so warming. It's a perfect for like a cold winter night. It comes together really quick. It's fun. It's something that your whole family can get involved in. And this is a dish, especially if you temper down the heat a bit, your kids will love this. So it's super family friendly. And again, really easy, lots of good tricks in here. Try this one at home.